Mind of a true adventurer.
You want to see Indiana Jones? That is Marion C. Cooper.
A legend is created.
I think the original movie is like the greatest piece of escapist entertainment ever filmed.
It was the most expensive picture that RKO had ever made.
Time diminishes his name.
People don't really know what the story is anymore.
But he is reborn greater than ever.
And action!
I've been trying it all my life. One way or the other, I've been trying to do this. I finally got it done.
This is the life of King Kong. A mysterious island, dangerous natives, dinosaurs, and a giant ape.
And cut.
Cut!
They're quick.
It's just another day in New Zealand for Peter Jackson and the cast of Universal's upcoming film, King Kong.
Pete is going to try and take the audience into another environment, transport them, and allow them to feel that sense of the unknown.
Keep it kind of, don't be too shy.
This retelling of the classic Kong movie is set to be the blockbuster of the year. But where did the story come from? How was it made? And who was behind it? To answer these questions, we have to go back to the early 1900s. Few people in the world lead lives as amazing as Marion C. Cooper's.
Marion Cooper is one of the most outsized, phenomenal characters who ever dabbled in pictures.
You want to see Indiana Jones? That is Marion C. Cooper. There's never been anybody like him, and I doubt there'll ever be anybody like him again.
As a young kid growing up in Jacksonville, Florida, he had two dreams in his life, and one was to become an explorer, and the other was to become a soldier. So those were two of the things that really drove his early life and what actually led him to get into World War I.
During the Great War, Cooper takes to the skies as one of the world's first combat airmen. After cheating death in the skies of Europe during World War I, Cooper volunteers in another conflict.
After World War I, Cooper was in a group called the Kosciuszko Squadron. And essentially they were helping the Polish Air Force with this mercenary group of American airmen.
It's here that he meets filmmaker Ernest Schoedsack.
They just met by chance on a railway station. And Schoedsack was like 6'6", and Cooper was like 5'9", 10. So they were like this long and short of it, and they were almost seemingly kind of opposites, but they just sort of connected. They just struck up this friendship. And at one point after the war, they said, you know, let's get together, let's do this and that.
He and Ernst Schoedsack, who was his partner in pictures early on, had this phenomenal history that had nothing to do with films. The escaping from this prison camp in Russia, having been caught during World War I, flyers and pilots and everything.
Well, the first thing that Cooper and Schoedsack did is they spent a lot of time at the American Geographical Society looking at maps and kind of like, what is the world like? What are the places of the world? What are tribes like? He was attracted to the idea of so-called primitive man or even savage man. What ended up happening is they decided, well, let's hook up with one of these tribes, these nomadic tribes, and just go with them on one of their migrations.
To obtain funding for this grand venture, Cooper turns to an old friend.
This woman named Margaret Harrison, who was actually a spy for the U.S. government in the First World War. Basically, she said, I'll help put up half the money for your expedition, but I get to come along. And there was like a woman on this trip. Schoedsack did not like the idea of a woman on the trip. It was like, what the woman going on with us to Persia? So it was the three of them.
Now fully funded, Cooper and company head out to uncharted territory to shoot their first film. The risks and lengths that they'll go to will surpass anything attempted by filmmakers of their time.
Here we go, please. Shooting and roll silence.
And rolling.
Playback and action.
Throws her down. She looks dead, and he prods.
There's a lot of Pete in Carl Denham and Cooper, and in many ways they're both adventurers. Cooper and Peter Jackson are these adventurous types who take big risks, gamblers in life.
And one last big prod.
As Marion Cooper, Ernest Schoedsack, and Margaret Harrison travel through the Middle East, they risk life and limb to capture some of the most magnificent footage ever seen. The end result is a type of film called natural drama.
The first movie he did was called Grass. It's called Grass because grass was essentially the key to life for these nomadic people.
Marion Cooper was really on the frontiers of a new kind of filmmaking, showing people who lived more cloistered, landlocked lives in the U.S. these scenes of native people and animals and exotic locations that they would never experience.
The one comment that anybody has who ever worked on a Marion Cooper picture was he would come in, whatever picture it was, he'd look around, throw his hat down, stomp on it, and say, "No, I want it bigger!"
The other movie they did was Chang, and Chang means elephant. Cooper's whole concept was, let's have a different type of drama if we're in the jungle.
After Chang, Cooper makes a third film titled The Four Feathers.
And then Cooper goes to New York, and he's involved as a pioneering executive in the field of civil aviation. He started percolating this idea of doing this movie.
His new idea is to shoot a film based on his travels and adventures, as well as another personal interest.
Well, Marion Cooper was fascinated by apes, and to him, the idea of a gorilla embodied all the terrors that he had also survived. He started writing this script when he was in New York, bouncing ideas off a guy named W. Douglas Burden. And Burden had made an expedition to Komodo Island, where he famously brought back the Komodo dragons. These two explorers concocted the ultimate tall tale, going to this lost world, but then also coming to civilization. And then finally he got a call from David Selznick, the famous producer. And Selznick wanted Cooper to join him in Hollywood at RKO Studios. And Cooper said, "Yeah, sure, I'll come if I can make my giant gorilla picture." Selznick said, "Okay," and they got rolling.
As Cooper dreams up his giant gorilla feature, a man named Willis O'Brien releases the first film to feature stop-motion animation, The Lost World.
Stop motion was in its infancy in the silent era. The greatest example of that is The Lost World.
Willis O'Brien kind of pioneered this stop-motion animation, which is this really incredibly laborious thing where you create puppets, let's say, and you just move them incrementally, one frame at a time, film it, move it another frame.
He's a hero to so many people working in visual effects today because he was able to create real character with these puppets. Better character than what's often done today with spending millions of dollars. He was able to achieve with his hands.
O'Brien's next project is an ambitious film titled Creation.
There had been a project at RKO called Creation, which is basically kind of an Atlantis story. There were dinosaurs on this island and adventures and so on.
And that was going to be this huge, big epic. RKO had poured so much money into that movie, it was insane. I mean, it was going to be one of the most expensive movies ever made.
David O. Selznick, along with Marion Cooper, killed Creation.
Because the budget was so large. I mean, they couldn't put it on the shelf because there's too much invested. So basically, Selznick asked Cooper, take a look at this, and is it worth saving? Should we stick with it?
They had shot a test reel with a Tyrannosaurus. That test reel happened to coincide with an idea that Marion Cooper had, stemming out of his documentary work. He thought, wouldn't it be great if we had, like, a gorilla fighting a Komodo dragon?
He goes, you know what? I could do my gorilla like this. He saw in this technique of stop-motion animation a chance.
In Cooper's eyes, stop-motion animation is the perfect way to bring his idea to life. He plans to title his movie The Beast, but later changes it to King Kong.
Marion Cooper went to Willis O'Brien. He said, can you make an ape like that? And O'Brien says, sure. So I think we got something. So they did a test reel. And they showed this to the executives at RKO, and they said, do it.
And just like that, Marion Cooper and his old friend Ernest Schoedsack begin work on what will become one of the most expensive and lavish films of its time. As King Kong nears completion, a marketing blitz unlike any other is unleashed.
Before the release of King Kong, there was a big build-up, you know, in New York where it premiered. There was all these Kong is coming and the radio spots, you know, where they had like screaming females. It was like this big phenomenon.
It was the most expensive picture that RKO had ever made.
The film ultimately cost RKO more than $500,000. To save on costs, many of the models and sets from creation are reused by Cooper. Finally, on March 2nd, 1933, RKO releases King Kong.
I think the original movie is like the greatest piece of escapist entertainment ever filmed.
One thing that I was struck by immediately upon seeing the original King Kong was how modern it is, how it's a movie that really is about the modern age and skyscrapers and airplanes and sort of the transformation of the New York skyline. The end of an era of exploration in which there are actually uncharted places in the globe that people didn't know about, that still had an aura of mystery about them. It was a fascinating movie.
It engaged me on an emotional level, and I felt so sad for Kong. I felt so sorry for him. I wept, and that stayed with me ever since.
King Kong comes along and blows the lid off of everything. It shows people things that they never even dreamed of. It takes them to a world that was beyond their imagination.
When Kong was originally created, it must have been an extraordinary thing to watch. Very, very powerful. The fact that technically you could make an 18-inch stop-motion puppet be 25, 30-foot gorilla convincingly and have heart and soul, it was such an achievement, and obviously it was a massive draw. I mean, it was a massive hit and lasted the test of time.
Filmgoers are wowed by the spectacular visuals of King Kong.
I remember it quite clearly. I remember certain iconic scenes, obviously, top of the Empire State Building, the scene where the hand comes through the window and pulls Anne out from the hotel room.
King Kong just had about everything in it. They made up their own rules as they went along, essentially. The only reason it's not in color is because the visual effects and the composites they did were just too challenging for color film to match different film stocks and different composite elements. But it had traveling mats, it had a rear screen projection, it had these great miniature sets that had screens built in them.
It's got lost islands, hidden in fog, dinosaurs. It's got natives who sacrifice the girl to the monster, and the monster turns out to be a giant ape, and the giant ape has to battle dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus Rex fights, and all this great stuff culminating to New York and the Empire State Building.
I think the special effects in Kong had a great impact on future effects. Everyone certainly looked back on Kong as an influence, whether it was the use of miniatures or the use of stop motion or the creation of personalities.
It has tremendous atmosphere, tremendous visual effects, not just the stop motion animation, but the paintings, the photography. It sets up this wonderful alternate reality. It's one of the greatest films anybody's ever done.
And the script by Schoedsack's wife, Ruth Rose, along with other contributors, makes Kong more than just a special effects showcase.
Ruth Rose understood him kind of the balance of the emotional side of it and the excitement of the world that they were creating.
King Kong was a Beauty and the Beast story in that it had this incredible ferocious beast, Kong, and the most gorgeous young woman, Fay Wray. It was something that attracts audiences to take that dichotomy of beauty and beast, and yet it's not just beast. It's a creature that has caring and consideration and emotion and pain and hurt, and you get to experience all of that.
Two characters in there, Robert Armstrong, who was the movie producer, and Bruce Cabot, who's the taciturn first mate on the USS Venture. That's Marion Cooper and Ernest Schoedsack. That's their characters. Ruth Rose based the character on Marion Cooper.
King Kong takes in nearly $2 million while in theaters, an astounding number for 1933.
A lot of people think King Kong saved RKO from bankruptcy. Well, it didn't. RKO did go into bankruptcy, but King Kong helped reverse their failing fortunes, and it helped lift the entire film industry. There's all sorts of people say that it was like a metaphor for the Depression.
In the coming years, various follow-ups and sequels are made, including a remake of Kong from Paramount in 1976, starring Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange.
It's a fascinating specimen of 70s Hollywood hokum. People who really worship the original King Kong see it as this grotesque bastardization of the original movie.
By 2000, the name King Kong is diminished.
People know about King Kong, whatever generation, even the younger generation, they know that King Kong is a gorilla, and they have images of King Kong on top of the Empire State Building, but people don't really know what the story is anymore.
But that's all about to change. By 2004, King Kong is alive only to his most dedicated fans.
I guess I'm called a film historian. Well, what you're looking at right here is the last remaining King Kong puppet. They built 2 for the movie in 1933. He's the prize of the place.
But in 2005, Kong is born again, thanks to a director named Peter Jackson.
You're terrified you're gonna die. I've always thought what a great idea it would be to do a remake that tried to capture that feeling of the original film.
I already knew that Pete was a big fan of the original movie.
King Kong obviously influenced Peter Jackson to become a filmmaker.
After the amazing success of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Jackson starts to make the movie of his dreams. The lessons learned from those films are applied to a brand new production of King Kong.
He said to me, Andy, I'd like you to be involved in Kong, and I'd like to take what we've learned from how we created Gollum and put it into practice on this 24-foot gorilla. My thoughts were, wow, that's some challenge.
I expect Peter Jackson's version of King Kong to be excellent. I can't imagine why Jackson would do anything that would dishonor the old film. In fact, I think quite the opposite is true. He will try to embellish his film with scenes that may not have been available to shoot, or just something he's created on his own.
Jackson adds his own unique touch to this new version of Kong.
I knew that if Pete was going to make it, he would make Kong very much a character, not just some kind of generic gorilla. And I knew that it would be an exciting and very challenging acting proposition.
An all-star cast brings the classic Kong characters back to life.
Jack Black's performance of Carl Denham in our version of the film, I think, really mirrors a lot of Pete's drive as a director. I think Pete and Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens wrote a lot of Peter into that, I'm sure.
I think Pete wanted to go younger because he wanted him to be like a Orson Welles type of character. Somebody who was really cocky and really full of beans and sort of a frustrated filmmaker.
I want the cast and crew on the ship within the hour.
No, Carl, you can't do this.
Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure.
It's not ethical.
What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh? They can get in line. I'm not gonna let them kill my film.
My character, Jack Driscoll, is a playwright, a screenwriter, and he's pulled from his element and forced to go rescue the girl of his dreams.
That changes everything.
Take it out! Behind the wall!
Wall! There's a wall ahead!
We met Fay Ray very briefly, yes, just before she passed away. It was incredible. I mean, I'd never met her before, and she was 96, and I shook her hand and started crying. I mean, I started crying. I couldn't help it. I thought, oh, this is terrible. I'm meeting Fay Ray and I'm blubbing.
It was great watching Peter and her together because this was his schoolboy crush. He fell in love with her at 9 years old. He then introduced me, said this is the new Andaro. She gave me her blessing, and her parting words were actually, Andaro's in safe hands. And so that was great. It really touched me.
Universal Studios releases King Kong on December 14th, 2005. For Peter Jackson, this isn't just another movie. It's the fulfillment of a lifelong dream.
I've been trying it all my life. One way or the other, I've been trying to do this. I finally got it done.
Someone once asked me, would Cooper mind, you know, Peter Jackson making Kong. And I think if Cooper came back to our planet from wherever he's at, I think he would totally approve.
His love for Anne and the way that the story plays itself out right up to the summit of the Empire State Building is what makes Kong so special, so mythic, iconic.
There are enormous expectations riding on this movie.
The anticipation for Peter Jackson's King Kong is enormous. Kong is such a beloved character because of the strength of that character, because of the emotion. I think the whole world wants to see Peter Jackson's version of that.
I hope they take away something of what excited me when I was 9 years old. We've done nothing but try to make a piece of escapist entertainment that will sweep you away. This is where it goes way beyond being Godzilla or just a monster bashing up a city. I mean, this is King Kong.